My name is Sam Spear. I'm an activist with Canvas for a Cause and Americans for Safe Access. And I'm here with Vey Linville, an outspoken advocate and medical marijuana patient. Good afternoon, Vey.
Good afternoon.
What is your professional and educational background?
I have very little formal educational background. I actually did not finish the 10th grade and have never attended college, although I have taught at both college and university. I myself have never attended a single day. My professional background, I was a precious metals broker, and from there became a commodities broker. Ended up being a securities broker, retired from Charles Schwab and Company. Then I went back to work and was a Microsoft trainer for a decade. So that's my professional background.
What condition do you suffer from, and when were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed about 4.5 years ago with severe emphysema. It happened very quickly, and they immediately put me on oxygen and referred me to UCSD for a double lung transplant. Told me that I was going to die. I declined the double lung transplant, decided that I didn't want to do that. Didn't really like the odds, and started looking for alternatives.
What pharmaceutical drugs are available to treat and or cure your condition? And which ones have you used in the past or are you currently using?
Well, there isn't anything to cure it. It's considered incurable. Mm-hmm. And when severe, considered terminal eventually. Mm-hmm. Some folks last a long time and some people don't. But it is considered a terminal condition in the end. There are a number of drugs given to people with those types of disorders. Many of them are toxic over time. And they were giving me, between the drugs for breathing and the drugs that control the different side effects from the breathing drugs and so on and so forth, 16 different things. And but no, there isn't anything that will stop or slow the progress of the disease officially.
How does medical marijuana help you?
There are two specific mechanisms that I know about. One of them is that it acts as a bronchodilator. This effect has been very well known and understood since the 70s. There were very useful studies done in the 70s comparing smoked or edible marijuana with albuterol, which is usually the first drug anybody with breathing trouble gets. And it's a bronchodilator. They both last about 5 hours. They both do about the same thing. But a lot of people find that albuterol tends to build up in the system over time, and that you have problems because of that. But interestingly, both drugs do about the same thing and last about the same amount of time as a bronchodilator. So it opens your airways. The other major thing that it does impacts a lot of other diseases as well. It is well known as a powerful anti-inflammatory. It reduces swelling, and obstruction is the other component of COPD and various types of breathing disorders. And that is the primary thing at work with emphysema. And this medicine is a powerful tool to fight inflammation, whether it's emphysema or arthritic diseases or many other problems that have at their root inflammation.
How did you discover that medical cannabis can help?
Well, after I declined the double lung transplant, like a lot of people coming to their end of their string, I thought I was going to be okay with it, but I really wasn't. And you get desperate, you start looking around for anything that might help. And there was a lot to find. There at the time were 5 different studies going on at UCSD about medical marijuana, and 2 of them were lung specific. So that was the very first thing to get my attention. And then I ran across something that said all through the 1800s in America that the most common thing that it was prescribed for was breathing trouble, and that caused me to look further. I ended up finding that Eli Lilly and Company, the pharmaceutical company, along with many others, sold this medicine in America for more than a century. And their recipes were readily available in an 1800s pharmacopoeia that I accessed online. That's how I made my medicine. I went out and joined a collective. At the time, I could barely drag my tank behind me. It was quite difficult to walk, and I was plainly dying. With the compassionate help of several local collectives, and because there was at that time a large, robust community of collectives of more than 200 in the county available, that I was able to obtain at very low cost more than a quarter pound of keef, which I put in a small amount of alcohol according to the directions, and consumed that over the next 10 weeks. That's a great deal of medicine. I mostly needed to stay in bed. When you have a serious internal condition like that you're recovering from, you need to rest, and it helps you to do that. But I improved dramatically, and although I'm still taking oxygen, I'm clearly not dying and clearly don't need a transplant.
How does medical cannabis help you, and how does it compare to these other pharmaceuticals?
Well, I suppose I would have to separate what it did for me when I took it in very large quantity, when I was very, very ill, and what it does for me now on a day-to-day basis. What it did for me then, in very large quantities, is it unequivocally saved my life, undoubtedly. It seems to have slowed or reversed this condition that you're not supposed to be able to slow or reverse. My condition is very different from what it was, and I was not expected to live this long. They told me at the time to go call my lawyer, and so of course my family and I are very pleased about that, of course. What the medicine does for me now in much smaller quantities is very simply, it allows me to take a deep breath. It keeps me from suffocating. I haven't had one bout of pneumonia since all of this began, which is usually the way people with this kind of trouble check out. I have not had a cold. I haven't had anything at all. And I seem to continue to improve. So it allows me to function. It keeps me from suffocating, lets me take a breath. That's what the medicine does for me.
Which of the many methods now available for ingesting marijuana do you think works best for you for your specific ailment? Why?
The gold standard for everybody has always been to smoke it. And several of the recent highly credible studies done at prestigious institutions, including UCSD, indicate that for some conditions there is nothing superior to smoked marijuana. That being said, it depends on the kind of help you need, the kind of medicine that you need, and how much you need. So if you're treating a condition that responds well to small amounts of smoked marijuana because of your ability to what we call titrate, to take just what you need and no more, and then a little more when you need a little more without ever taking more than you want. When you smoke, that's very easy to do, and that's one of the reasons that it's such a good way. But if you have a serious internal condition that may require much larger quantities to help, I'm certainly not in a position to offer medical advice, but should you need to take more, that's probably not a really suitable method to try and ingest a great deal. So then I'm fond of saying if you need a couple of aspirin, you don't go chew the bark off a tree. So concentrates are the logical alternative for patients that need an ongoing, concentrated, reliable, predictive sorts of medicine. So whether they're going to eat it or smoke it or drink it, as I did, butters and oils are a very effective route for many people, and that's a very credible approach. Alcohol is just one way. It was one that was used a lot in America because when you're very ill, you may not be able to grow, you may not be able to cook a variety of tasty treats with cannabis in them the way some of the people at the collectives do for us. But if you're real sick, you might not, even if you're not sick, you might not be a talented cook. And for a long time, when someone's been very sick, a quick and effective way to give them a reliable measured amount of this medicine has been in an alcohol tincture. So although we don't want to consume a lot of alcohol, you can put a great deal of medicine in a very small amount of alcohol.
Tell me about your activism and involvement in the fight for safe access here in San Diego.
When I first started looking for places that I might be able to get my medicine, this is something that I knew very little about. And in my quests to do that, I started meeting a lot of other patients, and many of them were involved politically. And I started meeting people with MS and MD and people that had polio as a child, and on. People that were dealing with both chronic and terminal conditions, and many of them were elderly. Many of them were veterans, and I saw them all being very poorly treated. And I didn't like that. I did not like being treated as if I were a criminal when clearly I was not, and that this behavior is something that's been fully legal under state law for nearly 15 years. And I am not a criminal. I refuse to behave as if I were, or to be treated as if I were. It's inappropriate.
Have you ever had any police encounters due to the use of your medicine? And do you know anybody who has?
I know a lot of people who have. Mine have been comparatively mild compared to some of the others that I'm aware of. And please understand, I have good friends that are law enforcement officers. And I have a great deal of respect for them. But yes, I certainly know people that have had negative encounters because they are patients. And you may have seen the logo very much like the standard handicap logo, but with the person in the wheelchair being struck from behind by someone in riot gear. That's certainly not what always happens, but it did happen that day, and it prompted that very compelling piece of art that so many of us have seen. And these people are often our aunts, our uncles, our grandparents, our moms, our dads, that are very ill and have the reasonable right to choose a legal medicine that works for them to relieve their suffering, and yet we continue to be harassed at every turn. And yes, I have, although I doubt the particulars of it are of any special importance, I don't think there's anybody that uses this medicine that, despite our legal status, hasn't ever looked over their shoulder or worried about possible law enforcement action against them, even though they're in full compliance with the law. I think that's something that each of us deal with all the time. Am I going to be able to get my medicine? Am I going to be able to get quality, safe medicine that doesn't have pesticides or molds or who know what? I like to know who grows my medicine. That's a good thing. And we certainly all have to deal with those issues on an ongoing basis. It's a very good question.
Aside from the police, how else do the recent bans on dispensaries in Imperial Beach and across San Diego County affect you and the patients you know?
That's a real easy question, actually. There's several clearly distinct ways that are simple to identify. We had more than 200 in the county. Right now, actual open retail locations, I'm aware of 4 or 5. There are some other things, but actual open places where you can go shop, those are the only ones I know of. There's one that's permitted by the county. It's far away from 80-90% of the patients in the county. These changes have required most people to go farther, pay more, have a smaller selection, and it's important that a person is able to get the medicine that helps them. There are many different strains available, and they vary in their ability to help different conditions and different individuals. So it can be critical for a person to be able to go somewhere known, safe, that they trust, where they can talk to other people and get input about what might help them best, different methods of consumption, and all of that. People do a lot better when they're not left on their own. It definitely affects pricing, availability, cost, all of that, of course. It's simple economics. It's obvious that it's going to. So the real issue with that is that the people that are most at risk are the ones that are the sickest, and the people who need the medicine the most are hurt the most by these closures.
Why does marijuana use for any purpose have so much stigma around it? Is it really as dangerous as some people think? Absolutely
not. There's never been any credible data to indicate anything like that at all. I believe some 13,000 people died last year from taking Tylenol in America. No one has ever died from marijuana. And so, no, it's simply not a dangerous medicine. It is an effective medicine, and we certainly think that there should be regulations out there. That's what Americans for Safe Access tries to accomplish, is to implement regulations so that patients have safe access in our communities in a controlled way that everybody can live with.
How difficult is it for minors to access marijuana in a dispensary versus on the street?
Well, I really don't think that the cartel is going to take anyone's ID. They're not worried about whether or not that person's a minor. That's an enormous part of their business model. I have never heard of any collective in San Diego County even being accused of selling anything to a minor, much less charged or convicted of it. It's simply, it would be idiocy for a collective to go through everything they have to go through to try and to come into legal compliance. Nobody does that. That's not happening. It's simply nonsense perpetrated by those who would posture against us.
Do you feel that state officials are making good use of tax dollars by criminalizing and often incarcerating patients?
Not at all. I really don't. When I was a teenager, there were 4 private prisons in America. Now it's closer to 300. They're enormous profit-making enterprises, which, along with the prison guards, unions, and so forth, are enormous lobbying efforts. We've created this gargantuan machine to arrest our children to no good end. The war on drugs is a complete failure. It's not helping anybody, and it's time to put it away. You asked me about my political involvements since getting sick and learning about the medicine. I have met so many other patients with life-threatening conditions and chronic illnesses, people with MD and MS, and people that have had polio, and on, people that are treating cancer, not just as an anti-nausea medication, but people using this as a primary treatment for cancer. It's really been an educational experience. I am honored to have known them, and I have been privileged to get involved with Americans for Safe Access, both here in San Diego, the San Diego chapter, and nationally. They're a wonderful organization. I, of course, have met a lot of people out there active politically on this issue for a lot of different reasons. I like Americans for Safe Access. They are patient-centric, and they are focused on the medical and therapeutic use of marijuana, which is something that almost every American can agree is appropriate. So I have worked extensively with ASA locally over the last 4 years and met a lot of wonderful individuals. I think that they are a fantastic organization. As part of that effort, recently I've worked with Cannabis for a Cause in San Diego. They work often on marriage equality and other gay rights issues, and have helped us greatly in the work on the street in cannabis reform in San Diego. Our big fight recently has been in Imperial Beach. It was a special one to me personally. I grew up in Imperial Beach. It's the most southwesterly city in America. And my parents met in Imperial Beach during World War II. He was a sailor stopping in for a beer. So my family's been there for a long time. It's a small place, only 2 square miles. And they had the most egregious ban in the state that was implemented, well, certainly in the county, no doubt, as it refuses to allow people to associate collectively at all, even without a storefront, and complete opposition to the state law. And between that and the city council so mistreating some of the patients that came to speak to them, I was really moved to act. And me and a lot of other people went door to door and got petitions and had signatures from some 25% of the residents of Imperial Beach. I believe over 15% turned out to be registered to vote, which was enough to put it on the ballot or force a special election, one or the other. And so we're awaiting word from the registrar of voters now, and are looking forward to a victory on the ballot in Imperial Beach.
In your opinion, what's the best way to regulate marijuana?
Americans for Safe Access has always avoided taking a position on complete legalization. And although many of our members certainly have a decided opinion on that, I think that it's very important that we keep in mind what the whole point of this was in the first place. And it's the people that really need it. And we have a situation right now, even with the wonderful legal gains that we have made, that about the only people in California that can't have any marijuana are the sick and dying. If you're in a convalescent home or in a hospital, any kind of state-funded facility, and you're suffering and you want some medicine and it can help you, you are very likely to be denied, even though it's completely legal for you to have this medicine. And that's one area where I think we all need to do the most work. And I'm a lot less worried about whether somebody can pick some up with a six-pack on the way home than I am about the people with cancer and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's having safe access to this medicine. And although more power to all the efforts out there, I don't want to talk against anybody, but as a patient, I think it's wrong to tax patients' medicines. We don't tax any other medicine. I think it's wrong to tax mine.
What do you think is the best way for patients, advocates, and activists to go about transforming the way the country views marijuana and to send lawmakers the message to end the prohibition?
I would highly recommend to get involved with Americans for Safe Access, particularly at the federal level. They are your best avenue to change. They are also of great help in getting you plugged in to all the traditional ways to influence the political process. If you want an easy way to write or call all your local and federal representatives, go on the ASA website and they'll plug you right into what you need. You can send an email to them all at once, and those traditional methods work. A phone call's better. A letter's even better. That counts for probably 1,000 emails. Send one to Obama. Send one to your Congress people. Send one to your local representatives. Call them up. All the traditional stuff works. Come to an ASA meeting. We have a meeting once a month in La Jolla, one in the South Bay, one in North County, and we'll be starting meetings in the East County again soon. If you don't live in San Diego, find an ASA chapter near you. Go to the national website. That's a great way to get involved in the effort.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me today, and I really appreciate your fight.
Sam, it's been a pleasure. Good afternoon.